Hello, welcome to News Desk. The 75th anniversary of the passing of Nana Ofori-Atta, Chief of Obuakwa State, between 1912 and 1943, enters its third day. He was born in 1881, elected chief in 1912, fondly referred to as Amantiremanmienu, which literally means he who bestrode two worlds. Was also the longest serving African on the Legislative Assembly of the Gold Coast. Today, Otumfuo Osei Tutu II becomes the second Asante to visit the Obuakwa State in the last 300 years. Good morning and welcome to News Desk with me, Bernice Abubedu.
In the olden days, each time an Asante visited Obuakwa, it was not just a visit, but it was war. Achim Obuakwa, to be specific, has always been on the opposing side of Asante since time immemorial. When we talk of since time immemorial, we are talking of, or we're talking about the days of when Asante defeated Denjira. It is clear in history that all the three Achims helped Denjira to fight Ashanti when Asante wanted her independence from Denjira. Not only that, almost all wars that Ashanti fought, Achim helped the opposing side against the Asante kingdom. This is why people think that there is a rivalry between the Achims and the Ashantis. Now, if you look at the caliber of people that make up the Achim society and the caliber of people that make up the Asante society, there is virtually no difference between them, cultural-wise, spiritual-wise, virtually everything, physically, mentally, spiritually, in all spheres of life, our way of life is the same. Our names, our language, it will be very difficult for anybody to differentiate between an Asante and an Achim. Before the Denjira Asante War, Achim was a power among the Akan community. There were three major powers: Achim, Akwam, and Denjira. What happened was that Achim was so powerful in those days that it overthrew the power of Akwam, so that there remained only two major powers within the Akan kingdom, Denjira and Achim. So for Asante to overthrow Denjira, the remaining opposition was Achim. Indeed, in the end, Achim was overthrown by Asante, and all those states that were overthrown by Asante became part of the Ashanti kingdom.
That was monarchical historian Osei Bonsu Kantanka, giving us some, insights and history lessons. Erastus Asare Donko is in Ofori-Atta, where the 75th anniversary of the passing of Nana Ofori-Atta, Chief of Obuakwa State, between 1912 and 1943 is ongoing. We'll take you to him later for him to just basically tell us what's happening. The last time we heard, the Ochihine was meeting the Asante at Bomso, and so that he could bring him into his kingdom. We'll be bringing you all the live updates that you need to know. Now, essayist and a literary historian Ivan Ajimandria wrote Seychelles Islands, which is a very significant piece or place in Ashanti history. He also co-edited Bumebe, Proverbs of the Akans, among other thought-provoking literary works. He's here with me for a conversation on Nana Ofori-Atta I and Achim Asante Heman relationship. Mr. Jimandria, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So, in the first place, why is this visit relevant?
Well, it has to do with the politics of our time. And the politics of our time goes to 20 years ago when people more or less within the New Patriotic Party decided to ask questions about the origins of their party, whether it was mainly the United Gold Coast Convention platform, or later on whether it was the 1954 formation of the National Liberation Movement, that is the NLM, which came out of the politics of cocoa price and which became a very dominant opposition to Kwame Nkrumah's rule. And then the debate started when in 1992, Professor Albert Edubuahin, half Ashanti, half Achim, became the presidential candidate of the New Patriotic Party. The argument then was Edubuahin, who was leading the party, was sort of a full Achim and not half Achim. And the premise of that was based on the thinking that Ghanaians probably wouldn't accept an Ashanti presidential candidate because of the fact of Ashanti's interest or maintaining the status quo of deferring to the Asante in all matters. So it was sort of going to degrade the position of the presidency. So this went on for a while, and because these two chiefs, these two kings, if I may, represented both the Asanteman and the Okyeman, it became natural that they were drawn into the politics of the time. So the relevance for me has to do more with what went into the 1992 presidential contest and the consequences of that contest. So if there is a relevance, it had to do more with that than the fact of the historical journey so far up to now.
Interesting. So can you help us understand this perceived rivalry between the Achim and the Ashanti in a historical context beyond the 20 years ago that you refer to?
It goes back, we're then talking about 700 years of history. And it will start with the Akwemu state, which was the prototype of an Akan state. Akwemu is now a small town in the eastern region, but it had all the trappings of an Akan state, of an Akan culture, as the cultural metrics of the Akans were symbolized by the Akwemus. For centuries, it was an imperial power. And then it slipped, as all powers slip with imperial movements. And then the dangerous became the dominant force at the time, sort of colonizing the other Akan states around them. Became very powerful until it also suffered defeat in a military coalition that the Kumasis, the Jabins, and other Akans who were under Dintra rule came together to form. And that also brought down the Dintra kingdom. Ashanti emerged, became powerful, and in the next 200 or so years, especially under the Asante Opoku the first, it consolidated its empire, became very powerful, and extended beyond the frontiers of Ghana. It's also natural in those times that there will be resistance to imperial rule from among the others, and the Achims happen to be the other factor, the other part of the accounts that resented Ashanti's supremacies. So there were disagreements, there were dissents, there were wars, and that was the basis of the rivalry, and that goes back to 600 years. But even that, if it comes back, these were the same people. Disagreements is like me and my brother against the enemy sort of situation, and then the migration stories got in. So Achims will tell you that, well, we migrated from Ashanti, and those who couldn't get to Achim proper were those who got stuck as Asante Achim. So these stories had been there for centuries, and it's always an issue for people to choose and pick what they want out of these elements of history for for what they want to use history for. So it goes back.
Now, today we are commemorating the 75th year of the death of Nana Ofori-Atta I. Do we know at that time what his relationship was as Ochihene with the Asante then?
No, there have been positive collaborations amongst them between the Ashantis and the people of Achima-Buakwa for years, if not centuries. And in 1919, for instance, when the Asante Prempe I had been taken to exile in the Seychelles Island after the Battle of Amanfo, which saw the decline of Ashanti after the British had overcome them, one of the leaders in the then Gold Coast, who was very forthright and campaigned for the return of Prempe from exile, was Nana Ofori-Atta. It also included people like E.P. Brown and other Fante intellectuals, as well as Kotepa Papio and other Ga intellectuals. And no, we shouldn't, of course, forget of Carl Christian Randolph, the Ga who wrote this magnificent book of the history of the Gold Coast and Ashanti. So there was this coalition, this pan-Gold Coast movement to make sure that Prempe returned. Ofori-Atta knew the consequences, that of course Ashanti was dominant, Prempe was bigger. Geographically, Ashanti was also bigger than Achima-Buakwa, and that even the founding states, be it Dwabin, be it Kokofu, be it Sumuja, which were seen as the founding states of Ashanti, each of these components was bigger than Achima-Buakwa. But he was still willing to sort of engage in a protest that will see the return of Prempe. So he looked beyond what we perceive today as rivalry and saw the bigger picture in terms of colonial conquest, in terms of colonial division, and what the colonialists were interested in, which was breaking the frontier of a powerful state for their own advantage. So that was there. And if we even go back to recent times, I remember in 1996, before the then paramount chief of Achima-Buakwa died, and during the reign of Otumfuo Osei II, on the occasion of his 25th anniversary of installment, one of the key leaders, traditional leaders, who graced the occasion and was guest of honor more or less, was the paramount chief of Achima-Buakwa at the time, Kuntunkrim. So, and he was a frequent visitor to Menchia, even as recently as 1996. And that brings me to the argument that it's the politics of the last 20 years that has really created this, what I may call artificial rivalry. And if you look at it, even in the political terms, sometimes there's the admission. When Nana Akufo-Addo won the presidency of this country, the first thing he did, and the first, technically, the first travel he made was to Kumasi. And his mission statement to the Asante was that, well, he belongs to the Oyoko clan. And since the Asante amongst their camp is the leader of the Oyoko clan, he had come to him to let him know that the people of Ghana had elected him to be the president of the country. Sort of acknowledging this history of 600, 700 years ago, in which there was nothing that was seen as rivalry, but collaboration, issue to do with trade relations, and of course there were quarrels and things, but the same people who quarreled, who migrated out of all sorts of historical reasons.
It's interesting you bring up President Akufo-Addo's action, but let's talk about how recent politics, beyond the 20 years that you referred to, has or may have deepened this sense of rivalry that you're talking about.
In the sense of
some key events, what some key personalities said or did,
yeah.
Maybe on campaign platforms, or maybe at a particular event that may have deepened probably the sense of this rivalry.
You see, politicians will always be politicians, and sometimes they say things and they do things, and upon reflection realize that they should have reviewed their thinking on some of these. You go to Kumasi, for instance, and many people don't really see the difference between who an Achim is and who an Ashanti is, because even amongst the accounts, the two are the closest in terms of language, in terms of the semantics of the language. It's very difficult to tell. And many people in Kumasi and Ashanti feel that, well, this Ashanti Achim, it's about the same Achim people we're talking about. So they really sometimes don't see the difference. If they did, Nana Addo's third term of getting into the campaign to become president was more or less engineered from Kumasi by people like the Sir Johns, who said that, well, even if at the time he is in a wheelchair, they will make sure that Nana Addo was president of the country. So it came from that movement of the third term campaign came from Kumasi. And they knew, they still know that Nana Addo is from Achim. But I don't think they interpreted national development, or they looked at leadership from that petty rivalry sort of things that some politicians, when they mount the platform, want the world to believe.
Interesting. Now let's look at this move by the Asante and the Ochihene and how it will impact our socio-political development between the two different states and even the nation as a whole.
Well, I don't think that it will, at least it will reduce unnecessary tension created by the politics of our time. That is for certain. Because what happened of exchanges by traditional leaders, by politicians, only fueled a tension that they created. So this step, for all I know, will sort of bring down the tensions somehow. But in terms of real development, each will also look at their areas, what it is they could do to uplift economic issues, social and political constraints that traditional rulers have the power to overcome. So basically, I think it will reduce tension. And this tension was created by politics and politicians.
I'll come back to you to find out from you what you look forward to seeing today, even as the Durbar commences. Okay. But first, we just want to let you know a bit more about this man, that is Nana Sir OforiAtta I, whose 75th anniversary of his passing is being celebrated. And that's why the Asante Hene is even going to the Ebuakwa state. Let's just let you know a bit about him. First Ochihene, or king of Achim Ebuakwa, he was educated in Basel Mission schools and at the Basel Mission's Ekropong Seminary. He worked as a clerk and then served in the West African Frontier Force, fighting during the Ya Asantewaa War. Elected on Manhene of Achim Ebuakwa in 1912, he became the second African member of the Legislative Council in 1916 to represent the Gold Coast. In 1927, Nana OforiAtta was knighted or honored as a Knight of British Empire for his hard-working role in government and service to the Gold Coast colony. He was thereafter known as Nana Sir OforiAtta or Sir OforiAtta. His approach to politics was a mix of educational modernism and aristocratic nepotism that gave as much importance to merit as it did to blood. Now, he was the brother of Dr. J.B. Dankwa, and Dr. J.B. Dankwa is the founder of the United Gold Coast Convention, Kwame Nkrumah's arch-rival, and one of the Big Six who collectively led the struggle for the independence of the Gold Coast. Gives you a picture of who this man was and what his family even represents in our political history. He was the father of Aaron OforiAtta, who was the 4th Speaker of the Parliament of Ghana, a Minister of Communications and Minister of Local Government. Also the father of Adeline Akufo-Addo, that's President Akufo-Addo's mother, I believe, the First Lady under the Second Republic, William Ofori-Atta, a Minister of Foreign Affairs and presidential candidate of the UNC. Dr. Akwesi is also a child, but he was the governor of the Bank of Ghana and finance minister under the First Republic. Dr. Jones Ofori-Atta, deputy minister of finance, and Susan Ofori-Atta, the first female doctor in Ghana, was also his child. Now, he was the grandfather of Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, Ghana's former foreign affairs minister and now president, and also grandfather of Ken Ofori-Atta of Data Bank Group and current finance minister, and Osadefo Amotia Ofori-Penin, who is the current of Chihene of Achim Ebuakwa. So that's the man we are talking about, Nana Sir OforiAtta I. Now, I mean, looking at this man and what he represented, and even looking at his family, it's interesting to see that level of influence that his family has, wielded in this country, isn't it?
Definitely. He was very interested in education, and it reflects in his post-death. The sort of the extended family as beneficiaries of what vision he had in terms of education.
And I mean, also looking at the dynamics now. So for those who didn't know, the Ochihene is sort of related to the current president, and some are even suggesting, we haven't had any concrete official record on that, but some are even suggesting that the president may have had a role to play in this event that we are seeing today.
Well, officially I'm not aware, but I think in the interest of the politics of the NPP, definitely they'll be happy that we have today the way we have it.
We've spoken at length about how, for you, this rivalry is quite artificial, in your own words, and created by politicians. What should they be picking from this? What do you think you, as a person, as a citizen of Ghana, and also as a historian, would like to see about our politics after this event?
Well, it depends on, people have motives of doing things, of going into politics, of saying the things they say, and also reacting to things they react to. So it depends on how the history of the country is used, and for what ends those who employ this historical past use it for. But as I said, there is enough evidence to show that we've had collaborations between traditional authorities in the past, between traditional authorities and intellectuals in the past. And if we even look at it critically, the other collaboration that for me was very meaningful was that between Nana Ofori-Atta and Prempeh II when Godgesberg died. Godgesberg was also the governor the Gold Coast at the time, and his death was a big blow to both Ofori-Atta and the Asante at the time, because they saw him as a friend, a mutual friend, and his death affected them psychologically. And when Ofori-Atta mourned, the Asante couldn't do so with him, so he asked that whatever he should go there to do, he should do it on his behalf as well, and on behalf of him at the Asante at the time. So collaboration was there, but historical past stands on its own sometimes, and future generations sometimes employ this for whatever they want to employ it for. But if you want to be very candid with history, and you want to be very truthful, this history we're talking about is a history that should forge unity more than what is done in the last couple of years.
And so do I get a sense that you wish that politicians will pick a cue from this?
Yes, they should. Because at the end, what is it? It's national development we're looking at. And there is no need, or is it helpful, to segregate a national agenda into ethnic rivalries for political gain or for political power. And sometimes if you are lucky, you get away with it, but other times, if not, these issues have ways of leading to things that at the end may not augur well for both development in the cultural and political sense of the word, and also for the development of the human being.
So what are you expecting to see today at the Durbar?
Well, there's something when it travels big. and, and the reason why I think the media is also very interested in this has to do with the fact that probably he may not travel with less than 300 people, probably 400, travel with chiefs, sub-chiefs, travel with a whole cultural emblem of Ashanti, the Otumfuo, the hornblowers, the royal, the court sort of royal poets. And so I'm sure it will be an exciting time in Chebi. And of course it's historic in the sense that we see it today.
And from the Acheme-Boakwa side, what are we likely to see? Because they are hosting the Asante.
The Asante, as I said, travels big. And the Ashantis always want to see the king's presence in big ways, to reflect on what they perceive are his powers, both culturally and politically. So I don't know, but probably it will be more than they expected in terms of the numbers, the logistics, the coordination of all these people traveling from Kumasi. Some of who I'm told were there, have been in Chebi since yesterday. So that is how it will be big, and at the end it will reflect both the prototype state of the Akan, which was constructed over 700 years ago, in this 21st century format.
And this is historic indeed, and we've got some Ghanaians speaking, sharing their thoughts as well about this. I will be bringing you those comments shortly. I would also take you live to the ground to see how the program is commencing. And the last we heard was that the Ochihene had gone to meet the Asante at Bomso, and if you know Bomso, that's almost the point of rest for many people traveling from Accra to Kumasi. So I will take those comments quickly and take you live to the ground. Osai Emmanuel Gifted Hand says, my people, I like your suggestions about the address. And okay, talking about the Asante and Ochihene's photo there, very beautiful photo. And the comments are on that particular photo. And he says, I like your suggestions about the dressing, but the pig is an old pig. Absolutely, this dressing can't be seen today. You want to comment about that, or how they sometimes have to behave in their private life? I want to believe that since they were not dressed in full regalia skins, this could be a private event.
I mean, you mean today?
No, I mean that photo, yeah. They're allowed to dress in formal...
I think so. And they are also very cosmopolitan. They lived abroad. They have acquired certain sort of tastes. So it's and they also belong to the Freemasons. I understand they play golf.
Okay.
So they are, in as much as they are traditional leaders of Ghana, they are also very cosmopolitan, and it shows in some of the things they do, some of their habits as well. So,
okay, then the reason I was asking you to just share that you're a historian, so many people may wonder why they would want to appear in clothing like that, because Ras Selassie is saying our chiefs and queens now prefer to be more comfortable in the pink man's dress. Obviously some sarcasm there is trying to refer to the white man. Are we moving forward as a continent or backwards? These are no small guys, he says, when it comes to tradition. But is this such a big deal? Because you're looking at globalization. I'm sure that when many Africans see quote-unquote Western people, white people in our local clothing, we get excited. Why is it that the opposite seems to, bring some sort of dissatisfaction among
I think it has also to do with our colonial orientation. You go to the UN these days and you find kente, strips of kente cloth, many parts of the departments of the United Nations, and we export a lot of our cultural products to these places, and the markets for these are even far bigger than we have here or we consume here. So it's gone beyond just somebody liking your product or you liking somebody's product. Of course, as the world, and globalization is not an event we're seeing now. It's been there for centuries. Of course, it never had that name of globalization, but it's always been there. When Prempeh went to exile in the Seychelles, because he was taught how to read and write. The weather or the climatic conditions will also determine what you have to put on and things like that. So you adjust if you are within your small enclave. That's fine. You can always do as is deemed fit. But as you get exposed to other parts of the world, other parts of other people's culture, then some level of adaptation will be necessary for
survival,
for survival, and for other matters too. So as other people like our culture or aspects of ours, so is it that some of us also like aspects of other people's culture.
All right. So Ala PK is saying, great analysis, kudos, JoyNews. It's an interesting time to get in touch with our history, and I'm sure this will expose many people to information that they would never have had. But as a historian, do you agree that, and going back to that photograph of the Ochehini and Asantehini in official suits, do you agree that those decisions can make us lose sight of our history a bit? Do you think it's much ado about nothing?
I think so, because they are more in the traditional. I mean, anytime in about over 90% of their outings, public outings, they are in traditional clothes more than otherwise. So once in a while, and depending on the occasion, and it's also these traditional clothing are. They are worn for specific purposes, for specific occasions, and for ease of sometimes movement. And if there are others also that you have to, because if putting them on sometimes also would demand certain responsibility, other people helping you do other things around. So if for ease of movement and sometimes for the sake of others, you have to adopt some of this, I think it's fine.
And our opinion on Facebook says British puppet and a traitor. Ajosika says he fought with the British against the Asante during the Asante War, and we've said that already. But why do you think people believed that Nana Sir OforiAtta I was more or was drawn more to helping the British achieve their goals more than helping his state at the time, which was Gold Coast? Some consider him a traitor. Why do you think so? Is it justified at all in any sense?
The uncertainties, it all has to do with imperial history. Which of my enemies is of less is a greater evil than the other? So sometimes you look at the permutations, and you look at the economic, the cultural, the political outcomes, and then you decide which cause will serve you and your people better. So, well, if at one point you realize that this is not the best option, but under the circumstances, this is how it should be, probably. And it wasn't him alone, but in the battle of in the 1890s, when the Atamanfo, when the British found the Ashanti army too difficult, they had to bring in people from the other colonies, from as far as Nigeria, when they thought that the battle was difficult. And these were other Africans on the side of the British. So it was the colonial setup, the imperial, the technologically advanced imperial setup, which could sort of coerce people to join forces against their enemy. So you could sometimes even do that, not willingly, but the forces propelling you to do some of these or to join some of these coalitions will be far excessive. And your disobedience or your failure to toe the line could also have some repercussions. So calculations were made. We may not know all the motives. We may not have all the answers why certain decisions were made, but some decisions were made, and these decisions were made in reaction to imperial designs.
All right, and we've explained why this is historic. We have Ivor Ajimandia. He's an essayist and a historian, and he's been giving us both the traditional and political history to what we see now and why this visit is historic. Now, a monarchical historian, Osei Tutu II, is also blaming politicians from the pre-colonial era for playing off Ashantis against the Achims. He says the visit of the Asante Otumfuo Osei Tutu II to Okyeman is a step to reconcile the two traditional areas. He believes it will also put politicians who have played diverse roles in sowing seeds of discord to shame. He spoke to my colleague Ohim Interior.
The people they claim are rival to Ashanti are brothers to Ashanti. You see, Ejeso, Ofenso, Ebuakwa, they all hail from one maternal grandparent. Nana Dokua root is Achim Ebuakwa. Achim Ebuakwa has extended invitation to the king of Ashanti, and he's also going as a brother. We think it should end there. No politician should ever succeed in playing Achim against Ashanti anywhere, anytime, any day, any longer. The theme of the union or reunion is peace and tranquility. Unity, peace, and tranquility. So if that is the message, then everybody, every member from either side should get it clear.
Clearly, Mr. Ajimandia, your colleague seems to agree with you perfectly on the role of politicians. But the question one may ask is, but why have we allowed them to be able to deepen or even create this rivalry in the first place as a people?
I think politicians will always be politicians, and they normally use the media sometimes to do some of these things. So it's also left to the media to decide on what they take politicians for, especially on some of the sensitive issues that they want to propagate. And look at the historical basis of that themselves and find out if there are bases for some of these. Because there's no point in allowing somebody who is ignorant of the past, of the history that he's talking about, to be given this time, to be given this space, to talk about something that invariably may not be the case. By doing that, by allowing these antecedents of history to be abused the way they are abused, I think we all need to review our positions, our stance on what politicians do.
And what do you think about a deeper effort, a more concerted effort to educate, maybe in our schools, maybe at different levels, so people will understand what the history is exactly as it is?
That is very critical, and I remember Professor Dubois writing about it this years ago, about what history should be used for. And Ivor Wells, a British historian who did so much and is seen more or less as the authority on 19th century Ashanti history, also said that much when he delivered the Aggrey Fraser Godesberg Memorial Lectures on One Nation, Many Histories, in which he looked into the history of the past and came out with the conclusion that sometimes history can be abused, and it can be abused in ways that could lead to destabilization, could lead to all sorts of troubles. So you are right in the sense that we need to also understand the basis of those happenings, of those historical past, in order then to arm ourselves against people who may not know but who want to impose this on us. And it should start with upcoming generations, as well as a review of the thinking and capacity of those already in the state they are.
Well, we're bringing you some live visuals there from Achim Ebuakwa, and as you can see, some chiefs arriving there. This is a big event, and the Okyeman is hosting the Asante today, even as they commemorate the 75th year of Nana Sir OforiAtta I's passing. I want to believe this is just a snippet or tip of the iceberg of what we are going to be seeing, especially when the Asante arrives. But back to you, Mr. Ivan Ajimandia. He's an essayist and a historian. Help us understand the use of the palanquin in an event like this, the umbrellas, the Adoa dances. Yeah. What do they all symbolize?
The day will be dominated with such cultural elements. And among the accounts, the size of an umbrella of a chief defines how big or small the chief is. So as you see big umbrellas, you then begin to feel, especially if there is a collection of them, that a paramount chief or some bigger chief is on his way. So the big ones represent the power and the influence of a chief. The small ones will normally be the ones of the sub-chiefs, sort of the wing chiefs of a paramount chief.
And the palanquins, are there differences?
There are differences. It's also influenced by the environment in which the chief is coming from. But the Akans are in the forest region of the country, or the forest belt, and so invariably the cultures, the elements of these cultures are about the same. There are some variations here and there, but invariably is about the same size.
Interesting sights and scenes. If you just joined us, this is News Desk, and we are covering that historic visit of the Asante to Achim Ebuakwa. It's the second visit of an Asante to the Ebuakwa state in 300 years. You can imagine that. And we have been telling you exactly what has been happening so far on the grounds, and also bringing you a history of all of this. I've been speaking to Ivan Ajimandia. He's an essayist and a historian, and we've also taken you live to the ground. Really appreciate your time here this morning. It's been really insightful and exciting talking to you.
Thank you for having me and for allowing me to recollect my history.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll be bringing you more right here on News Desk. Do stay with us.